In this video, we're going to talk about how to calculate your hourly or billable rate that you can use as a part of hours-based pricing. Now, look, even if you're not doing hours-based pricing, I think this is a valuable exercise for you to go through just because what the output of this is going to be to understand what the cost is per employee per hour to your business. Again, whether or not you're doing hours tracking or not, that's still important data versus what you're then charging, and then also some other calculations that you can make to really help your agency run a lot more smoothly. Calculating an hourly rate is really as simple as just gathering a bunch of data and then doing some very simple math in order to come up with how much our ideal hourly rate should be based on what our costs are at the business plus the desired margin. So that plus desired margin that you see up here, this is where we can start to play with a value, right? We can't change the costs of our business per se. We got to account for that in terms of the overhead, in terms of how much we're paying per employee. We want to get that number, and then we want to tack on what desired margin is, because if we have all the costs accounted for, whatever we tack on is going to essentially be the profit margin of the business. So if we can get all that data together, then we can come up with a very accurate and fair billable rate to charge clients. So of course, we've built a template, a calculator that will do all this for you, but I do want to walk you through real quick, manually, all the input so you understand exactly how we arrive at the billable rate. So the first thing that we're going to ask you to do is get together all of your expenses. And again, this is done at the employee level, right? We're not doing this at the aggregate level. That's why we built a template, so this can do it for you automatically. But I need you to understand, if you are a freelancer, if you're a solopreneur doing this on your own, this is how you calculate the hourly rate per employee. So it starts with all the overhead expenses that go into running the company, your rent, your software, etc., everything that goes in. Then you put in the salary of that employee. Benefits or taxes. So this is an important note. I have all these stars here throughout because our agency does not pay benefits and we do not pay taxes on employees because we 1099 everyone. We have 10 full-time folks here, but they're all 1099s. W-2 versus 1099 is completely up to you. We prefer to 1099, first of all, because our staff does too. They don't have a problem with getting paid in full. They can handle their taxes and their benefits on their own. It's not that complicated anymore. It's 2021 after all. And by them knowing how to do so, they actually make more on their salary due to tax breaks and benefits. So W-2 versus 1099 is completely up to you. You can absolutely scale a business on 1099s as long as they're working for you full time. So we don't actually take this into our calculation, which makes it a lot easier. However, if you do W-2 your employees, then you're going to want to account for what the benefits that you're paying for and taxes. It's usually around 30%. So then what we're able to come up with here is the total annual expenses per employee. After we have that, we want to calculate the cost of doing business, AKA the desired profit margin. So if your desired profit margin is 30%, I usually like to leave between 30 and 40%, then you're just going to tack that on to the cost per employee. So this right here is the total amount per employee, expenses plus desired margin built into it. This is probably the most time-intensive part, but don't worry, we took care of all these calculations for you, is understanding the number of hours that work, because your employees, even if they're 1099s, they're not going to be working 40 hours a week every single week. They're going to have holidays, vacation, sick days, potentially travel days, whatever kind of perks and benefits that you give your people. We give them actually unlimited time off. They can take off whenever you want, but this actually comes out to about the average per year that people take out. So we want to account for those. Again, this is never going to be exactly accurate, but this is to get the closest to accurate as possible. So you can just use the numbers that we came up for you. So the total number of these days together is about 37 days or 296 hours. Again, that's an important number to keep in mind as we go through the calculation process, because we can't bill for hours not worked on client engagements. So we like to usually set a goal of 30 billable hours per week or 6 billable hours per day per employee. That's the number that we want to try and get them to hit in terms of them billing on a client account. Again, if you're using hourly model, to ensure that we can hit our numbers. So that's a very important metric that you're going to look at, is billables per employee or revenue per seat, that we'll talk about in a little bit. So at 30 hours a week times 52 weeks, that's 1,560 hours. And then we just remove the time off, 296 gives us to 1,264 hours, AKA the number of billable hours that we need each seat to hit per year in order to hit our numbers and our projections. Again, that number is never going to be completely accurate, but what this gives you, again, is a metric to measure against per employee in terms of how much work they're billing and how much money we're making per employee. After we have that, then we can start to calculate the hourly rate. So the cost of business is $171,000. The total billable hours per year is 1,264. So if we just divide that total number by the total hours, we get our hourly rate. So our hourly rate based on this for this employee would be $135.75 per hour. That would be the rate that we'd want to charge the client when we're doing our pitching for that employee. And of course, like I said, this is where you can start to play. When you see what this number is, if you think that you can be charging more, then you want to go back and you want to play with your desired margin, push that up a little bit if you want to raise your hourly rate. And that's really what it comes down to there is your expenses are going to be dynamic. They're going to be constantly changing per client. So your hourly rate might raise up just naturally just to keep pace with your expenses. But once you get these numbers, what we can do is now we can start to really run our agency properly. We can look at KPIs like revenue per seat. How much revenue is each person generating or billing per year for the agency? Because if you know that number, if you know how much they're billing, then you know how much you're paying them and you can understand what your profitability is per seat. And more importantly, your profitability per level, your profitability at the top level, your mid-level employees, and then your entry-level employees. You'll start to understand what the margins are per employees. And then when you're pitching work and when you're structuring your contracts and your campaigns, you can understand where to put these people so you can maximize profitability. Again, you'll need to know those people individually to see if they can handle that work. But again, these are the kind of in-between strategies that so many agencies sleep on. They're just doing top line revenue versus how much things are costing, and they're missing all these amazing data and insights that can really help you to grow and scale your agency so much smoothly and more predictably. So revenue per seat is a good one to look at. Another one is utilization rate. So that is just the total number of hours billed by the total number of hours available. This tells you if you need to hire another position, if you need to sell more work, right? What's the utilization rate per employee? If we're only utilizing, Steven at 50%, then we either need to assign him more work, or we need to go and sell more work to put more weight onto his plate, because we got to get him to hit that 30 hours per week of billable hours. And again, in order for us to meet our profitability goals. And then the final one is just what are our pipeline needs? Again, if we're looking at how much work our staff has, both when it comes to the pipeline and hiring, really, if everyone's only billing at 25%, but they're complaining about how much work they have to do, then there's either a problem with the work that you're giving them, they're not tracking their hours properly, or they have plenty more hours to give in terms of doing work. They're just complaining about it. So these are the three kind of KPIs that you can look at when you're tracking your hours, and then you're also using the hours system. Again, even if you're not using and billing for hours, this is a very valuable exercise to go through so you can understand what these metrics are, and you can still map your revenue against these. So what I want to do now is I want to jump into the financial planning template. We used to call this the utilization rate tracker in the old version of Blueprint, but we stripped it down to make it a lot more simple because it was just very complicated and very time consuming to use. So this really is just to understand what each employee in your agency should be charging in terms of an hourly rate. And then also looking at some financial projections based on all the inputs that we give it. So let's jump into the plan. So here we are in the tracker. The Getting Started tab down here at the bottom will kind of help you understand the flow of how to fill this thing out. It's step by step. You can watch this, but I want to run you through the whole template so you can see all the inputs that go into it and then also the output that comes out of it, which is incredibly impactful. So after you go through this too, I usually like to hide these tabs. That way it just kind of clears up the bottom for you and you have less things to look at. So the first tab here is a settings tab. Column A, you don't have to touch this. This is actually pulling from the roles tab, which we'll talk about in just 1 second. But everything else here is meant for you to kind of fill out and populate. So role types really just means, is this role static like a CEO? This is a one-person position. We're not going to hire another CEO. Versus scaling, something like a strategist or offshore help, something that as you take on more clients, you're going to need to add more of those roles. If you have other role types there too, project-based, contract-based, whatever you wanted to put, you can just type it in here and it will allow you to select that as you go through this. Expense types too. So as we populate your expenses for your company, the different types of expenses that you have, the templated ones that we have here, rent, software, marketing costs, miscellaneous as well. You can get more surgical just based on whatever your numbers look like. This over here in yellow, this is where we're going to fill out all those kind of manual calculations that we talked about. Again, we've kind of got this done for you already. You can just adjust it based on your thoughts and inputs. So if you are paying taxes or benefits for your employees, this is where you put it in. If benefits are 30% of whatever you're paying, then you put that there. Again, all of our people are 1099, so I don't push these into our calculations. These are the yearly workdays. Again, I've kind of got some notes here for how these have come up with. You don't really need to change these unless you have a very different structure than what I just ran you through in terms of time off. But this takes out weekends, this takes out holidays, vacations, sick days, the whole nine. And this tells us the total number of workdays, the total number of billable days, and total number of billable hours on a yearly and monthly basis. This helps us to do the calculations in the back end so you don't have to do them manually. So you just got to fill this inputs in here depending on what your agency does. The final part down here, this is the multiple, right? So this is the desired margin. So if you want a 50% margins, you put in 1.5. If you want a 3x your margins, you put in 3. Pretty straightforward. Just make sure you're using whole numbers and not decimal points here. So the final piece here is just utilization rate. What's the minimum that you want your staff to bill 60% is what we have here. And then the maximum of 95%. This could go all the way up to 1. We can leave that at 1 because we're happy to let them bill a full amount. And then the available start months over here, this is just going to adjust it just based on the calendar where we are now. You can make this January 2021 if you want to do this for 2021 calculation. So that's everything in the settings tab. Next thing that you're going to do is you're just going to populate all the clients that you have. So the name of the client, the start date, the end date, and then the total amount monthly. If you're doing project-based work, you just make sure to set the end date, short, and then just put the total amount that they're billing during that time period. Or let's say it's a 3-month sprint for a total of 15, then you could put in start date, April, end date 3 months later, and then a total of $5,000 per month because 15 divided by 3 gives you 5. So that gives you the monthly amount. So fill all this in. So next big tab that we need to fill out here is going to be the roles tab. This is where we're going to put in all of your people and their salary. In column A over here is we have the bucket. So like our leadership team, our delivery team, our account team, sales team. I don't have sales in here because they work on commission, so we don't need to factor that in. This is really only for people who are touching client work. After that, we have the job title. So again, this is all completely up to you. Everyone watching this has a different stage of where your agency's at, both revenue wise, how much you're charging clients, location, right? I'm in Miami. People here are a little bit more expensive than they might be in Idaho. So I can't give you the exact structure that you need. This is something that you're going to have to continuously grow into and mold as your agency grows. And if you have any questions about it, make sure to hit us up because we can help you out and help you understand who the right role is for where you are within your agency's growth. But essentially what you're going to put here is just kind of the job title, again, static or scaling. Everyone at the top level is static for us. All these other ones are scaling. We're constantly hiring these people. And then the total salary based on the year. So this is all the manual inputs here. And then everything else over here is going to be calculated automatically for you, including the hourly cost to the business and the hourly billable rate. So you can see here that this formula is pulling from the settings tab, all the inputs that we gave it here. And then also looking at their salary, telling us the cost of the business, and then what the billable rate should be for that person based on all the inputs that we give it. So you can already see how simple that was to calculate the hourly rate. Now you have that, let's talk about what else goes in here. Next tab is a team. It's just where you get a little bit more surgical. The team and the roles are very similar. You're basically just going to take a lot of what you put, fill it in here. Again, everything in red here is going to be a formula, so you don't need to touch that. You just want to kind of fill in over here pretty much already what you put in the roles. This is just, again, getting more specific in terms of the people. The final piece here is going to be our expenses. So this is literally what your business expenses are. If you have office rent, the software, marketing costs for ads, anything that your business is incurring, you want to put it in here. Make sure that you track it in terms of the total monthly expense and the start and the end date, because if this is something that you're only paying for a month or 2 months period of time, then it will snapshot that. And then the final piece here, so after you do that, you can kind of hide all these tabs. The final piece here is the most important piece, and this is essentially building us a P&L based on the inputs that we give it. So not only are we giving you the hourly billable rate that you should be charging, we're also telling you what the hourly cost of that employee is to the business, but then we're also building out this projection. So this date is going to pull from whatever you put in the settings tab, right? But basically it'll snapshot the number of clients that you have in that month, the total number of revenue, your total number of expenses, and also your total monthly payroll for just your people. And then it will tell you profit and then also your gross margin percentage. This is very, very impactful stuff. I know a lot of you aren't even really tracking your financials that detailed, so you can use this as a very rough, very high level kind of expense tracker that will tie together everything from your staff to your people to your expenses and everything in between. And then this will track your monthly expenses down here. Then this is pulling the salary expense detail. So that is the entire template. Like I said, you can use this not only to build the proper hourly rate, but also to understand what your agency's numbers are. So this is an incredibly impactful exercise. Take the time to fill this out. It's going to uncover a lot of insights about your business, but then also, again, helping you to scale and grow more comfortably and responsibly, and really understanding what your numbers and your figures are and what they should be and how you can adjust that and how you have control over it. So again, this is not just for hourly pricing. You will get your hourly pricing model out of this, but you'll also get a ton of financial data that is just going to be helpful and beneficial to running your agency. So fill out this template, ask any questions that you have, and I'll see you in the next video.